I was in my first appointment out of seminary. I'd been working on this project with some other pastors and lay leaders in the conference. We were working on this big conference education event. We had a big time author that was coming to speak at our event. We were pretty proud of ourselves. We were pretty excited about this. And I think just by virtue of the fact that I was appointed to Colleyville and happened to be closest to the airport, I got the task of picking up said author at the airport and bringing them to our event. And it was David Kinnaman, who works for the Barna Group and has written quite a number of books about generations in the church, and uses all that data and surveys and stuff. So I got to pick him up, and I think some of the other worship leaders and people who'd come from other places. And as I was driving them to our conference destination, he mentioned something, and I can't remember who he said he'd heard this from, but he'd been picked up at another time, another event. He is a pretty popular speaker. And he said this person that picked him up one time, also in the Metroplex, had driven him by. They were talking about like big churches and things like that. And the person said, well, I'll drive you by the biggest temple that we have. And he drove him by AT&T Stadium. That's the biggest temple that we have. And when we think about it, Sunday night is not about church. Sunday night is football night. And if something owns a whole day of the week or several, that's a pretty good indication that that's what we really worship, whether we say so or not. Today, Palm Sunday, is about truth-telling. It's about getting honest about who and what we worship. We want to worship Jesus. You wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in Jesus. But it's harder than just showing up on Sunday morning, right? Because when we get out of here and when we start the day Monday, there's a whole bunch of other things that are vying for our attention and our affection and our praise and our trust. So what Jesus did on Palm Sunday was stage a little political theater, an alternative parade. Because it wasn't the only one that day in Jerusalem. He was demonstrating that there is a different way of being in the world. And that if we didn't choose consciously, specifically, daily, it would be very easy to find ourselves at the other parade, at the worshiping sports or violence or entertainment or whatever mixture of all of those we have today. But I want to tell you this morning about someone else who was gospelized. I've been sharing examples from Scripture and from life beyond the Scriptures of people who were good news, who were changed by Jesus and then changed those around them. In the same chapter, just a little bit before the Palm Sunday parade, according to Luke's gospel, it was probably a few days before, Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem, and he goes through Jericho first. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through town. A man there named Zacchaeus, a ruler among tax collectors, was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but being a short man, he couldn't because of the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed up a sycamore tree so he could see Jesus, who was about to pass that way. When Jesus came to that spot, he looked up and said, "Zacchaeus, come down at once. I must stay in your home today." So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus. Everyone who saw this began to grumble, saying, "He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, half of my possessions I give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, "Today, salvation has come to this house because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek out and to save the lost." Let us hear what the Spirit is speaking to God's people. There's a number of ways to look at this passage. And we have several questions that are not answered in the text. For example, was this the moment that Zacchaeus repented and changed his ways and said, "I will do this from now on"? Or had he already done that? Had he already made that decision? Had he already given some of his possessions to the poor? Had he already been doing that? It could be read either way in the Greek. It's not clear. But a couple of things are clear. Zacchaeus chooses to follow Jesus. He wants to see Jesus. He wants to live in this new way of being in the world. And he knows he can't do that just halfway. He can't just say, "I want to follow Jesus," join in the line, and go along. He knows for some reason, somehow, we don't know how, but he knows that he has to actually walk the walk. He has to actually be different in order to follow Jesus. And what he offers to do indicates pretty clearly that he's all in on the discipleship thing. He doesn't just say, this seems like a good idea. I like Jesus, nice guy, pretty compelling story. Think I'll do that. He jumps all in. He goes all in. I'll give half of everything I have to the poor. If I've defrauded anyone, and I'm sure the people around him went, if. I mean, he was a tax collector. Not just any tax collector. It specifically says he was a chief tax collector. A leader among tax collectors. And you didn't get to be a leader among tax collectors by being extra generous or nice to people. You usually got that way because you took out a little something for yourself. You bent the requirements. The tax collectors were not known to be the most honest people. Zacchaeus knows that if we do this, we have to go all in. And that's where I want to tell you about someone else, another follower of Jesus who believed in going all in. His name was Father Daniel Berrigan. And he was a pretty interesting person because he kind of defied any kind of label or categorization. He was a poet, he was a priest, he was a Jesuit, specifically, the Society of Jesus, which emphasizes working in and amongst other cultures and kind of being embedded within other places. They'd be sent around the world. He worked in Latin America and Europe. He'd been sent all over the place. But he was an all-in kind of person. He believed that you had to be all in. He worked at Jesuit communities around the world, and really, he wanted to be a live demonstration that a different way of being in the world was possible. And he saw this as really being not something out of the ordinary or something to be celebrated as unique. He believed that this way of being different in the world was the common calling of all Christians. So I want to share this person with you, his witness, not as a way of saying, see this one guy who was set apart, he was a priest, and everybody should follow that path. Because that's not what I'm saying. That's not realistic. That's just not the case. But the reason I'm sharing him is that he believed he was no different than anybody else, than any other Christian. That we were all called to the basic Christian norms of hospitality, love of enemy, caring for the poor. That those weren't things that just certain special people should do on behalf of the church, but that is who all church people should be. All of Jesus' disciples should be. As he saw it, God loves and saves the world through people who behave like Jesus, as Jesus taught everyone to behave, giving expression to the good news of God's order in all things. He believed that should just be the bar, the norm for Christians. This took him in some interesting directions, shall we say. His brother was also a Catholic priest, although in a different order. He was a Josephite father. But he had started his career in the military and then become convicted that those were not compatible and that he needed to be a part of the anti-war movement, the peace movement. So this was during the Vietnam War. His brother Philip had already gotten into trouble for some public demonstrations. And Daniel then joined him in another one. They and 6 other activists in May of 1968 in a town in Maryland went into a draft board office and took some of the files, some of the draft papers, took them outside and burned them with some homemade napalm. Pretty obvious, clear message there. They said, these papers don't have a right to exist, that these should not be. And they challenged this automatic adherence to the way of the draft, the way of violence. And he wrote in a play that the great sinfulness of modern war is that it renders concrete things abstract. And that this burning of the draft files, he said, I was trying to be concrete about death, because death is a concrete fact, as I have throughout my life tried to be concrete about the existence of God, who is not an abstraction, but is someone before me for whom I am responsible. So that earned him a 2-year sentence in prison, which he served with no problem, with glee, I suppose. That was expected. He did not expect to not be punished for that. What I found so interesting and compelling about Father Berrigan is that idea that he wanted to make things so explicit that nobody had to guess what he was trying to say. It was very obvious. And he believed that whatever you were called to do, you should be all in. He didn't believe that everybody should do the things that he was doing. He understood that there are many different ways of being a disciple. But he knew that what he had to do was be willing to give his all, his whole life, in pursuit of what he understood as the call of Jesus on his life. As I said, I'm not lifting up Father Berrigan today as if to say he is the model for all of us to follow. That was a unique path that he chose, and he believed in that. But there are many paths, and we are all chosen to respond, to follow Jesus in different ways. And we are called with the same gospel to not just go about it on Sunday morning, believe in it in theory, but to become it, to make it plain for others. So, like Zacchaeus knew, he couldn't just say, I want to follow Jesus. Let's do this. He knew it would require change, a whole different way of doing the life that he had been living. He knew it would have to affect what he said and did. And that's what we're called to do, to let the call of Jesus affect all of our lives, our everyday lives, what we do at work, what we do at home. That should be obvious to people, that we are living for Jesus, that we are presenting a new way, a different way of being in the world. One of dedication, one of love, service, sacrifice. Those things that Jesus called all of us to do. Not just some people on behalf of the church to do good things, but that all people were called to become good news for others. All of us have been called to be all in our discipleship. I hope that you have had an experience this morning where you have maybe been challenged by a new idea or faced with looking at God in a different way, or that you have been invited to open your heart. And if that is the case and you are looking for what God might be calling you to next in your life, I would love to be a part of that. My contact information is on the bottom of the prayer request page. Feel free to call or text or email me and set up a time that we can visit together about what God is doing in your life. And if you have made a decision and that you want to give your life to Christ or reaffirm your baptism, if it has been some time and you've gotten maybe distracted and been on some other paths, if you want to join with us on this path in this community of faith, then we would be honored if you would consider that. And if you would like to do that, I would love to celebrate that with you this morning. If you would come and share that with me as we all stand and sing together our closing hymn. Thank you again for choosing to begin your week in worship with us. I do hope that you will share your gospelized sticker with someone this week. Maybe invite someone to our Easter services next weekend. And I hope that you have a wonderful experience of Holy Week so that your experience of Easter might be even richer. People of God, our mission is to make disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. How will we do this? By creating a connected and inclusive, Jesus-centered faith family that transforms lives. Let us go and do as we have said. Go in peace.